Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is MTG Ghoul Dude, and today we're going to be finishing off the Eldrazi's. And to start us back off, we're going to finish off with Eldritch Moon because we covered the Commander Masters in the last video near the end. So, this was right around the time when I started and I was getting deep into Magic. So, I was already encapsulated by the Eldrazi's. But to start it off, we have Wretched Gryff for 7 generic mana, and it has an ability. It's a 3/4 Eldrazi Hippogriff. It has the Emerge ability, which, if you didn't play during this time, you may cast the spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. Whenever you cast it, you draw a card, and it has flying. It of the Horde Swarm for 8 generic mana. It is a 4/4 Eldrazi Insect. It has Emerge 6 and a green. When you cast it, put 2 1/1 green insect creature tokens onto the battlefield. Abundant Maw for 8 generic. It's a 6/4 Eldrazi Leech. It has the Emerge cost of 6 and a black. Whenever you cast it, target opponent loses 3 and you gain 3. Lashweed Lurker. Now, this is probably one of the more unique ones, as we'll see as we get older into the video. For 8 generic mana, you get a 5/4 Eldrazi Horror, but its Emerge cost is 5, a green, and a blue, and whenever you cast it, you may put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library. So you could essentially sacrifice a creature to pay the Emerge cost to get it down to maybe a green and a blue, and then bounce a thing. So that's actually pretty interesting. Vexing Scuttler for 8 generic. It's a 4/5 Eldrazi Crab. It has Emerge 6 for 6 generic and a blue. Whenever you cast, you may return target instant sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. This is one that I was looking at that I was like, I could actually use that if I put it in Muldrotha, because I can't get instant sorceries back, but I can get these back. Mockery of Nature, and this is probably one of my favorite ones besides another one that we'll see later on. For non-generic, it's a 6/5 Eldrazi Beast, and it has Emerge for 7 and a green. And whenever you cast it, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. But I just love the artwork on it because it looks like it evolved from like a badger mole or something. A badger or a mole. Eternal Scourge. Now, this is probably one of my favorite ones because it's probably the most degenerate out of all of them, besides the Titans. Because for 3 generic, you get a 3/3 Eldrazi Horror, and you may cast it from exile. And what does that go good with? If you said Food Chain, you'd be correct. If you said anything else, you might be still correct. Because this is like a ham sandwich. It's just the cheese on the ham sandwich. When Eternal Scourge becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, exile it. Which is pretty cool because you can just automatically send it back. Distended Mindbender for 8 generic. It's a 5/5 Eldrazi Insect, even though it looks like way worse than that. For 5 and 2 black, whenever you cast it, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose from it a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less and a card with 4 or greater. So you get to pick high and low. And they discard those cards. Elder Deep Fiend for 8 generic. And it might just be coincidence that a lot of these are set at 8. But I haven't figured that out, what the coincidence is. It is a 5/6 Eldrazi Octopus, and it has Flash. Why they wanted to give an octopus flash, I don't know, but there it is. It has the Emerge of cost of 5 and 2 blue. Whenever you cast it, tap up to 4 target permanents. This was the bane of Standard in the time of control decks during that meta. Decimator of Provinces. For 10 generic mana, it's a 7/7 Eldrazi Boar, and its Emerge cost is 6 and triple green. Pretty messed up how that's triple green. but it does play well in those ramp overrun decks, because whenever you cast this creature, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample to it a turn. And it itself has trample and haste. So, sack a big dude, lower it down, run everybody through. It's pretty good. And then we have the lady herself, Emrakul, or the being itself, Emrakul the Promised End. For 13 generic, it's a 13/13 Eldrazi. And its cost is 1 less to cast for each card type among cards in your graveyard. Now in Commander, this is actually pretty busted because you can get it all the way to where it's pretty cheap. But it also has a second line of text, a second paragraph. It says whenever you cast or gain control of target opponent. Oh, excuse me. I'm yawning. You gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn. So if you wanted to mess with somebody real quick before they decide to swing back on you, here's your chance. And it also has flying, trample, and protection from instants. So you can't deal with it immediately, but you can still deal with it. And here we start getting into the creatures that ended up becoming Eldrazi's. Starting out with Lone Rider for 1 and a white. It's a 1/1 human knight. It has first strike and lifelink. And at the beginning of the end step, if you gain 3 more life this turn, transform. And what does it transform into? It that rides as one. And I like this art a lot too, because it's just really unique. It's 2 beings that have become one. And it's a 4/4 with first strike, trample, and lifelink. And I love the flavor text, how it transfers over and continues. Horse and rider are often of one mind. But until this morning, I'd never seen them be of one body. I love the flavor text in this set. Extractor of Sin for 2 and a white. It's a 0/3 human cleric. That's a little underpowered, but when it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another permanent. If you do, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield. And I always liked seeing where they started their transformation first. In some of these cards, some of them you can't tell, but some of them they're plain to see. I think this one, it's under his mask because of the blood and everything. But it also has the Delirium ability at the beginning of your upkeep. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, transform it, and it transforms into Extricator of Flesh. It's a 3/5 Eldrazi horror, and it says Eldrazi you control have vigilance. It's pretty neat. And if you notice in the background, the head that was chopped off is now starting to wriggle a little bit. And it has an ability that says for 2 generic, in tapping it, sacrifice a non-Eldrazi creature, put a 3/2 Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield. So it makes tokens. I kind of wish it would have kept its cleric. I don't know. Clergyman can stay clergy. And here we get into the big bads, the ones that were really heralded as the best in this set, and what people have told me. This meld that really just sets the whole set apart from everything else. Gisela the Broken Blade for 2 and 2 white. It's a 4/3 flying, first strike, lifelink, legendary creature, Angel Horror. So it's not there yet. So beginning of your end step, if you both own and control Gisela the Broken Blade and a creature named Bruna the Fading Light, exile them and meld them into Priscilla, Voice of Nightmares. And if I'm looking correctly, yes, Bruna comes first. Bruna the Fading Light for 5 and 2 white. She is a 5/7 Angel Horror. Whenever you cast Bruna the Fading Light, you may return target angel or human creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, this is just maybe me, but now that I think about it, I would love to build a deck around either Bruna or Gisela and make it an Eldrazi deck but it's creatures that ended up becoming Eldrazi's, or you sacking creatures to make Eldrazi's. And the flavor text in these are she now hears only Emrakul's murmurs, and she now sees only Emrakul's visions, which you can wonder if no, you can't really see you can see the transitions, like the wings, the tendrils coming from the wings on Gisela, and Bruna, her wings are starting to I guess I don't know what the word for that is. They're starting to change though. And it's pretty gnarly what she becomes, what they become. They become Brucella, Voice of Nightmares. It's a 9/10 Eldrazi Angel, flying, first strike, vigilance, lifelink, and your opponents can't cast spells with converted mana cost 3 or less. And the flavor text reads, upon discovering what had become of her sister, Sigarda could only weep. It's pretty neat. Curious Homunculus for 1 and a blue. It's a 1/1 Homunculus, but you can tap to add a colorless, spend only to cast instant or sorceries. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 3 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, transform Curious Homunculus. I actually put this in a crazy mad scientist deck, Eruth. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's actually pretty different. But Curious Homunculus will no longer be curious because it will be voracious. It will be a voracious reader. It is a 3/4 Eldrazi Homunculus with prowess, and it has another ability: instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Grizzled Angler for 2 and a blue. It's a 2/3 human. You can tap it to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. If there is a colorless creature card in your graveyard, you transform him into the Grizzly Anglerfish. It's a 4/5 Eldrazi fish, and for 6 generic creatures your opponents control, attack this turn if able. So it's kind of like Goad. Yeah. Docent of Perfection. This is the continuing of the cycle of the Delver of Secrets. So now he's turned into an insect horror for 3 and 2 blue. It's a 5/4 with flying. But whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Then if you create 3 or more wizards, transform it into Final Iteration, which is basically he is now leading the swarm and making more. It is a 6/5 Eldrazi insect with flying. Wizards you control get +2/+1 and have flying. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Graph Rats. This is the beginning of a meld. For 1 and a black, it's a 2/1 at the beginning of combat on your turn. If you control both Graph Rats and a creature named Midnight Scavengers, exile them, then meld them into Chittering Host. The other half is Midnight Scavengers for 4 and a black. It's a 3/3. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. And what is Graph Rats? 3 or less. And it transforms into the Chittering Host. It is a 5/6 Eldrazi horror with haste and menace, because rats have menace, most of them. And whenever it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. So it's actually pretty neat. Feldarian Pariah. You can start seeing it because she has an extra arm and her neck is getting elongated. For 3 and 2 black, it's a 3/3 vampire horror with flying. Sacrifice 3 other creatures, transform it. And it also has a madness cost, which I always thought was different. But the madness is 3 black. And it transforms into the Abolisher of Bloodlines. I really thought it was odd. It's like you don't see goats in that one, but there's a goat head in this one. It's really strange. And she gets all these arms and tentacles. But she's a 6/5 Eldrazi vampire with flying. Whenever it transforms, target opponent sacrifices 3 creatures. So this would actually be a good, what is it called? Aristocrats type deck where you want to sacrifice all your creatures. Vilden Pack Outcast. I think I did that. Vilden. I don't know. For 4 and a red, it's a 4/4 werewolf horror with trample. For a red, it gets +1/-1 until end of turn. And for 5 and 2 red, you can transform it into the Drone Pack Kindred. Is a 5/7 Eldrazi werewolf with trample. Then for 1 generic, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So you can just buff it up to your heart's content. Conduit of Storms. For 2 and a red, it's a 2/3 werewolf horror. Whenever it attacks, add red to your mana pool at the beginning of your next main phase this turn. And for 3 and 2 red, you can transform it into Conduit of Emrakul. It's an Eldrazi 5/4 Eldrazi werewolf. Whenever it attacks, you add 2 colorless to your mana pool at the beginning of the next main phase. Smoldering Werewolf for 2 and 2 red. It's a 3/2 werewolf horror, and it enters the battlefield. It deals 1 to each of up to 2 target creatures. So for 4 mana, that's not bad. But when you transform it for 4 and 2 red, it becomes Erupting Dreadwolf. When it attacks, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. So it hones in on the target, I guess you can say. And it is a 6/4. And here's another one that I always wanted to get off, but I could never get it there. It's the combination of Hanwar Garrison and Hanwar Battlements. So Hanwar Garrison for 2 and a red, it's a human soldier 2/3. Whenever it attacks, put 2/1/1 red human creature tokens onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It's pretty good. Hanwar Battlements is a land. It says you tap it, you can add a colorless mana to your mana pool. For a red, target creature gains haste until end of turn. And for 3 and a red, if you both own and control Hanwar Battlements and a creature named Hanwar Garrison, exile them, then meld them into Hanwar, the Writhing Township, which is just nasty. It's like the whole thing just got up. But it is a legendary creature, Eldrazi Ooze. I wonder if they would allow you to, like, if your play group was cool enough, they would allow you to play this. Like, you would have to have Hanwar Garrison and Hanwar Battlements in the command zone. I wonder what kind of rules you would have to put on with stipulations. But you can see, like, in the Hanwar Battlements arc, yeah, that the tendrils are starting to come over the city, which is pretty cool. And this is an Eldrazi Ooze, which is pretty neat. But it is a 7/4 with trample and haste. Whenever Hanwar, the Writhing Township, attacks, you put 2 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature tokens onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Ulvenwald Captive for 1 and a green. It's a 1/2 werewolf horror with defender. But you can tap it to add a green to your mana pool, and for 5 and 2 green, you can transform it into Ulvenwald Abomination, which is a little bit scarier. Yeah, it looks like it's bursting open. But it is a 4/6 Eldrazi werewolf that you can tap to add 2 colorless to your mana pool. Kessig Prowler for a single green. It is a 2/1 werewolf 4, and it has the ability to transform for 4 and a green into the Sinuous Predator. It is a 4/4 Eldrazi werewolf, and it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Shrill Howler for 2 and a green. It is a 3/1 werewolf horror. You can definitely see the Emrakul's influence on these more than you can the people. Creatures with power less than Shrill Howler's power can't block it, so anything 3 or less can't block it. But for 5 and a green, you can transform it into Howling Chorus. Oh, I don't think I've ever seen this one. Yeah. It's a 3/5 Eldrazi werewolf. Creatures with power less than Howling Chorus can't block it. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi horror creature token onto the battlefield. So it just makes more. Tangled Claw Werewolf for 2 and 2 green. It's a 2/4 werewolf horror, and it can block an additional creature each turn because it looks like, I can see it. It looks like it's already starting to grow more appendages, like the tendril coming out of its neck and the elongated fingers. But for 6 and a green, you can transform it into Fibrous Entangler. That is a 4/6 Eldrazi werewolf with vigilance, and it must be blocked if able, and can block an additional creature each combat. Pretty cool. Here we get into the ones that it's another one of those that becomes an Eldrazi, but kind of isn't. Cryptolith Fragment for 3 generic. It is an artifact and it enters the battlefield tapped, but you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and each player loses 1 life. If you are playing a Villas deck, this is really good or a Belby deck, because everybody's losing a life. I don't know if Belby does the whole life loss, but maybe I think it's just damage. But each player loses a life, helps you kill everybody a little faster. At the beginning of your upkeep, if each player has 10 or less life, transform it into Aurora of Emrakul. I think that's actually really cool art. It's a 1/4 Eldrazi Reflection, which is something we haven't seen in a while. It has flying and death touch, and whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 3 life. It's pretty gnarly. But that is going to be it for today, guys. I really appreciate everybody joining me in covering these wonderful spawns of Lord knows wherever they came, the Blind Eternities. And I hope to see you in the next video, watching, commenting. All of you that aren't subscribed, it'd be real cool if you did. But that is it from me to you. I'll see you guys next time in the graveyard.